In the 1960s, a Stanford psychologist sat 4-year-olds in front of a single marshmallow. He told them, "Wait 15 minutes without eating it, and you'll get a second one." Then he left the room. What those children did next predicted their SAT scores, body mass index, likelihood of drug use, and net worth. This was tracked at age 27, 40, and 50, with statistical reliability that stunned researchers. The ability to delay gratification is not a personality trait. It is a trainable cognitive skill. It's the closest thing psychology has found to a direct predictor of financial outcomes. Here's what they actually discovered, and what everyone gets wrong about it. The marshmallow study is the most famous experiment in developmental psychology. It's also the most misunderstood. The popular interpretation is simple: kids who wait get rich. Kids who don't. Self-control is destiny. That interpretation is wrong, or at least radically incomplete. The corrections that subsequent research made are far more useful than the original finding itself. If delayed gratification were purely innate, this would be a video about accepting your limitations. It is not. Research shows delayed gratification is a skill with identifiable components, neurological substrates, and training protocols. Understanding the actual mechanism is the difference between blaming your temperament and changing your behavior. In 1972, Walter Mischel at Stanford published the original marshmallow study. He and his colleagues tested 653 children at the Stanford University Bing Nursery School. Children who delayed successfully showed better academic outcomes, social functioning, and stress management. This was seen in every subsequent follow-up study at ages 18, 27, and into their 40s. The finding was real. Delayed gratification predicted outcomes across decades. But here's what the original study could not tell you, and what researchers spent 40 years assuming it did. It could not tell you whether delayed gratification was the cause or a proxy for something else entirely. In 2018, psychologist Tyler Watts at NYU and colleagues published a replication of the marshmallow study. It used a sample 10 times larger than the original, including children from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. When Watts controlled for family income, home environment, and parental education, the predictive power dropped by 2/3. 2/3, the marshmallow test was not primarily measuring self-control. It was measuring whether the child lived in a reliable environment. Children from stable, resource-rich households had historical evidence that adults keep their promises. When the researcher said, "Wait and you'll get to," that child's experience said, "That is probably true." Children from unstable households had historical evidence that delayed rewards often don't arrive. Eating the marshmallow now was not impulsivity. It was rational inference from prior data. Here's what nobody tells you: delayed gratification isn't just a skill. It is a skill that requires a foundation of environmental trust to function. You cannot train yourself to wait if your experience has consistently taught you that waiting doesn't pay. That insight doesn't eliminate delayed gratification as a target. It locates it more precisely, and it changes what interventions actually work. The ability to delay gratification has a precise neurological address. It lives primarily in the interaction between two systems, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system, specifically the nucleus accumbens, drives immediate reward-seeking behavior. The prefrontal cortex, specifically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, maintains goals, plans, and inhibits impulses. In simple terms, the limbic system wants the marshmallow now. The prefrontal cortex knows about the second one. In 2011, researchers at the University of Oregon conducted neuroimaging studies of participants making intertemporal choices. These were decisions that trade off present against future rewards. They found that high delayers showed greater activation in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and significantly lower relative activation in the ventral striatum, the reward processing center. The critical finding was not that high delayers had stronger willpower. It was that they had learned to reframe the choice. Mischel's own later research, published in 2014, identified specific cognitive strategies. These were used by children who waited successfully. They didn't sit there gritting their teeth against desire. They changed what they thought about. They turned the marshmallow into a picture in their mind, not a real object. They distracted themselves with songs or stories. They reframed the marshmallow as something inedible. This is called cognitive reappraisal, the deliberate reinterpretation of a stimulus to alter its emotional impact. The children who waited didn't have more willpower, they had better cognitive strategies. And cognitive strategies are teachable. That distinction is everything. Because willpower is finite and depletes under stress. Reappraisal is a skill that improves with practice. Here's the intervention that Michel's later research pointed toward, and behavioral economists have confirmed. The children who waited longest were not exerting more willpower than those who ate immediately. They were working less hard because they had strategically reduced the cognitive load of waiting. Researchers discovered one overriding pattern: physical distance from the reward predicted waiting duration more reliably. Children who couldn't see the marshmallow waited dramatically longer than children who could. The choice was structurally easier. In behavioral economics, this principle is called choice architecture. It's the design of environments that make the preferred behavior the path of least resistance. Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein formalized this in their 2008 book Nudge. They demonstrated that default options and environmental design change behavior more reliably than motivation or education. In financial terms, the application is direct. If your spending money and your savings money exist in the same checking account, visible, accessible, fungible, you are asking your prefrontal cortex to run a constant inhibition effort against your limbic system. Your limbic system will win most of those battles, not because you lack discipline. Because you've set up an architecture that requires maximum effort for every single financial decision, every single day. The intervention is not trying harder, it's changing the architecture. Separate accounts, automatic transfers, pre-committed spending rules. Each structural change removes one willpower battle from your daily cognitive load. Multiplied across 365 days and 30 years, that architectural difference is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The marshmallow study's most actionable implication was never be more disciplined. It was, cover the marshmallow. Let's make this concrete. Delayed gratification operates differently across four major financial decision domains. And the intervention in each one is specific. First, spending. The core conflict is between present consumption and future purchasing power. The mechanism is present bias, hyperbolic discounting. The intervention is pre-commitment. Decide in advance, before the stimulus is live, what the spending rules are. Then automate enforcement so the decision doesn't happen in real time. Investing. The core conflict is between the certainty of cash today and the uncertain but larger compounding value of that cash held. The mechanism is loss aversion producing a preference for liquidity. The intervention is inertia by design, automatic investment. This removes the recurring decision and with it, the recurring opportunity to choose the immediate option. Debt. The core conflict is between the relief of minimum payment now and the dramatically lower total cost of aggressive payoff. The mechanism is present bias compounded by scope insensitivity. The intervention is debt snowball or avalanche commitment in writing. Executed by automatic payment, not manual monthly decision. Career. The most financially consequential delayed gratification domain and the most neglected. The decision to invest 2 years in a certification, a skill, or a lateral move that lowers immediate income but raises 10-year trajectory. This is the highest return delayed gratification available to most earners. In 2019, economists David Otter and Anna Salomons found that workers who made lateral skill investments during mid-career, often at short-term income cost, showed wage trajectories 34% higher by decade's end than workers who optimized for immediate compensation. Delayed gratification in the career domain doesn't just pay, it compounds. Watts's 2018 replication of the marshmallow study had a finding that most financial content refuses to address directly. When socioeconomic status was controlled for, the predictive power of delayed gratification dropped by 2/3. That means the skill, to the extent it predicts outcomes independently, is being developed unevenly. And the unevenness follows a specific pattern. Children raised in environments characterized by resource scarcity, housing instability, and unreliable caregiving don't just lack the incentive to delay, they lack the neurological infrastructure. In 2012, researchers Gary Evans and Michelle Chambard published brain imaging data. It showed that children raised in chronic poverty had reduced prefrontal cortex development and elevated cortisol levels, compared to children raised in resource-stable households. The prefrontal cortex is the neurological seat of delayed gratification. Children from high-adversity environments are being measured on a cognitive skill that chronic stress has physiologically impaired, and then told by financial advisors, personal finance influencers, and self-help culture that what they need is more discipline. Here's what that advice misses completely. The marshmallow test does not measure character. It measures the cumulative neurological effect of the environment a child was given. And environments are not chosen by children. They are structured by policy, geography, inheritance, and circumstance. This does not mean delayed gratification is not developable. The neuroscience is clear. The prefrontal cortex retains plasticity into adulthood. Skills can be built. Environments can be changed. The architecture can be restructured even after a difficult beginning. But it does mean that any honest account of why this skill is unevenly distributed has to name the structural causes, not just catalog the behavioral differences. The gap in delayed gratification capacity between income groups is a gap in developmental environment. Financial advice that doesn't account for that is describing symptoms and calling them causes. 3 interventions, each drawn from the same research that identified the mechanism. Each builds a specific component of the skill. First, practice cognitive reappraisal on small purchases, daily. Michel's strategy research identified reappraisal as the active ingredient. The training protocol is this: once per day, when you encounter an impulse purchase under $50, stop for 90 seconds, mentally place the purchase behind glass. Not forbiddance, not judged, just not immediately real. Ask one question: what does this purchase represent emotionally? Not whether you can afford it. What emotional function it's performing. Fatigue, reward after a hard day, social comparison, boredom. Naming the emotional function creates cognitive distance. That distance is the prefrontal cortex engaging. You are training a neural pathway. Small purchases, daily, for 30 days produces measurable changes in impulsive spending behavior. Second, restructure your financial architecture before testing your willpower. Thaler and Sunstein's nudge research is unambiguous. Environmental design outperforms motivation. This week, not someday, this week, complete 3 architectural changes. Open a separate savings account that is not connected to your primary debit card. Set an automatic transfer on payday, any amount, to move money there before you see it. Unsubscribe from every retail email list currently in your inbox. Each change removes one recurring willpower contest from your life. The goal is a financial environment that makes the preferred behavior the path of least resistance. Third, make one delayed gratification commitment in writing, with a witness. The pre-commitment device is one of the most replicated findings in behavioral economics. In 1998, Dan Ariely and Klaus Wertenbrück found that self-imposed deadlines significantly improve performance. The act of writing a commitment changes its psychological status. It shifts from intention to contract, which carries the social and identity cost of violation. Write one financial commitment, specific, dated, measurable. Tell one person who will ask you about it. That structure is not accountability theater. It is a pre-commitment mechanism engaging the same prefrontal pathways that Michel's Heidelayers were using. Here's the one-sentence summary. Delayed gratification is not a fixed trait you were born with or without. It is a cognitive skill with a neurological address, a developmental history, and an evidence-based training protocol. The marshmallow test measured your environment. What you do next measures you. If this changed how you think about self-control and wealth, subscribe. Every week on this channel, we go deeper into the psychology behind every financial decision you make.